Matthew 21, storming the glass gates. The squeak of a dry erase marker against the whiteboard was the only sound in the room, sharp and rhythmic. Leo sat in the second row, his shoulders tense from an 8-hour shift behind the wheel of his hybrid, watching the black ink form crisp, block letters. At the front of the room, the teacher stepped back, cap clicking onto the marker, leaving a faint cloud of chemical dust settling into the metal tray below. "All right, let's lock in," the teacher said, tapping the board with the back of his hand. "Today, we are stepping past the road from Jericho and crossing the city limits. We're covering the explosive, front-page confrontations of Chapter 21. But I need you to keep your eyes on the horizon, because everything we read today is deliberately setting up the trap. Tomorrow, when we hit Chapter 22, the trap springs, and we'll watch the systematic testing of the sacrificial lamb." Leo leaned forward, resting his forearms on the laminate table. On his left, Chloe was already sketching a jagged line across the margin of her notebook, her fingers stained with fabric dye from her studio. The teacher pointed to the first heading on the board. 1. The High Security Disruption, verses 1 to 11. "This isn't a polite Sunday school parade," the teacher said, his voice dropping into a grounded, conversational rhythm. "In a modern setting, this is a calculated, logistical shutdown of the city's main transit vein. Jesus doesn't call a black car or slip in through a back entrance. He sends for a specific, low-end commuter vehicle, the modern equivalent of an unremarkable electric scooter or a beat-up delivery bike, and rides it straight down the center lane of a major downtown avenue. He forces a high-alert security city to look at a king who refuses their war horses. It would completely freeze the grid," Leo muttered, his voice cutting through the room's silence. The teacher nodded at him, gesturing for him to continue. "I mean, if someone did that today during a high-security summit, the dispatch apps would crash, traffic control would go into a tailspin, bypassing checkpoints with a grassroots crowd stripping off their own designer jackets to carpet the potholes. It's a total security breach. It's a statement that the city doesn't own the streets anymore." "Exactly," the teacher said, drawing a thick line down to the next topic. 2. The Economic Takeover, verses 12 to 17. And he doesn't stop at the gates. He rides that momentum straight into the financial hub, the grand atrium that serves as the gateway to the religious establishment. Think of a massive, glass-walled corporate megachurch lobby or a commercialized cathedral square. There are tech kiosks, digital payment terminals processing convenience fees, and high-end vendors monetizing the space. The teacher made a sweeping gesture with his hand, mimicking a physical strike. Jesus walks in and shuts the operations down. He physically flips the kiosks, smashes the digital screens, scatters the cash across the polished marble floor, and the moment the corporate racket is cleared out, the security guards are powerless to stop what happens next. The atrium is immediately flooded by the disabled, the unhoused, and the marginalized. He turns a high-volume financial marketplace into a free, street-level medical clinic. Chloe stopped sketching, looking up from her pad. "It changes who the space belongs to," she said quietly. "If you clear out the vendors, the people who were always pushed behind the barricades suddenly have the center of the room. It's beautiful, but it's terrifying if you're the one managing the ledger. It's fatal to the establishment's bottom line," the teacher replied, moving to the third point. 3. The Illusion of Fruit, verses 18-22. The next morning, on the commute back into the financial district, we get the object lesson. Jesus looks for breakfast on a roadside fig tree. From the highway, it looks lush, vibrant, and full of green leaves, the perfect corporate image. But up close, it has zero substance, no fruit. He curses it, and it withers to the dirt. It's a direct shot at empty institutional polish. If an organization looks green and successful on its social media feeds but produces no actual life for the people on the street, it's already dead on arrival. The teacher turned to the final cluster of verses on the board, tracing a bracket around them. 4. The Trap of Authority and the Two Parables, verses 23-46. By the time he walks back into the courtyard, the board of directors and the corporate lawyers are waiting for him. They demand to see his credentials. "Who issued your license? What agency authorized you to flip those tables?" And Jesus completely humiliates them. He asks a counter question about John the Baptist that exposes their intellectual cowardice. They won't answer because they're terrified of public relations and losing their market share. The teacher's marker squeaked again, drawing a sharp, aggressive arrow from the bottom of chapter 21 across the center of the board, pointing directly to a fresh title on the right, Chapter 22, The Testing. He circled the word foreclosure under the vineyard parable and turned back to face the class, leaning against the podium. You have to see the progression here, the teacher said, looking around the room, meeting Leo's eyes, then Chloe's. In chapter 21, Jesus didn't just ruffle feathers, he staged a coup at the city gates, crashed the temple's economy, and told the executive board that their lease was being terminated and given to a grassroots community that actually produces results. He pushed them to the absolute brink. They can't just ignore him or write him off as a street preacher anymore. He has forced their hand. The room was dead silent. The faint smell of dry erase ink hung in the air. The teacher tapped the arrow pointing toward the next day's text. Which brings us to tomorrow, he said, his voice dropping to a sharp, quiet intensity. In the ancient Exodus protocol, the Passover lamb had to be taken into the house and thoroughly inspected for 4 days to ensure it was completely flawless before the sacrifice. That is exactly what chapter 22 is. Tomorrow, the establishment sends in their absolute best audit teams. The politicians, the theologians, the corporate lawyers, the status quo defenders. They are going to hit him with every impossible, multi-layered trick question their best minds can construct, desperate to find a single blemish in his logic to justify destroying him. He snapped the cap back on the black marker, the plastic click echoing off the walls. Today is the declaration of war, the teacher closed, looking at the board one last time. Tomorrow is the testing of the lamb,